as well. Time for the Type 5 with Neil Treacy. Neil, good morning to you.
Morning, guys. How are you doing?
Very well. Ireland's line-out discipline, the 5-metre tap and go is making a comeback. England, Shades of Ireland 2019, Champions Cup and Challenge Cup draws today. What's on the cards? And Lions Watch, which we didn't get to last week. Let's start with Ireland's line-out discipline. A lot of credit going to Paul O'Connell. It's like he's kind of arrived with a magic wand and fixed everything, and maybe he has.
Yeah, for the most part, he's fixed a lot of things. A lot of the simple stuff, I suppose, that Ireland were messing up really over the course of the last year. Just the movement of the players in the line out, issues around throwing, and I think it's just general communication and organisation. But we kind of spoke last week on the Tide 5 about how Ireland were actually really, really good last week at how they were kind of playing off the back of lineouts and, you know, the speed of the attack. But just something towards that happened twice in the second half that I want to look at is Ireland's discipline at lineouts, because they did concede 2 penalties inside the Italian 5-metre line that would actually be a bit concerning, because we speak so much about over the course of those first couple of games how Ireland weren't as clinical as they needed to be when they got the chances. And if you think back to the game against France in Paris in October, when Ireland had quite a few chances in the French 22 as well, and, you know, consistently messed up or couldn't quite get their maul set. So this is just something that happened a couple of times in the Italian, inside the Italian 5-metre line 2 weeks ago, and just something to watch out for again this coming weekend, because it's a very, very simple play. It's no real like dark arts or anything like that. It's nothing like the kind of nothing intricate like the scrum stuff we were talking about last week. It's just probably trying to push the boundary out a little bit too far and ultimately kind of getting caught out. This is probably one of the oldest plays in the book, just to protect your jumper. So we're going to run through a few stills here. The first one we have, this is the setup of the line out. 5 metres from the Italian line, and circled in red there we have James Ryan standing behind Tadhg Byrne. So these are the two we're going to be looking at. Tadhg Byrne ultimately is going to be the jumper, and James Ryan is going to be lifting from the back. So that's the first image we have, just to kind of set the scene and show you where they are and kind of where they're facing, as you can see, pointing towards the touchline. So if we roll it onto the next clip, the next picture, you should be able to see on your screen here now, this is Tadhg Byrne up in the air. James Ryan is lifting him from the back, and you can see the 2 arrows that I have on the screen there. They're kind of pointing diagonally back down the pitch. So at this point, Tadhg Byrne has gone up into the air, and I'm kind of doing James Ryan lifting him here. But what he's doing is he's lifting him up and he's turning him like this, and he's kind of taking a step out to his right, so that he's moving out in front of Tadhg Byrne, and he's kind of positioning Byrne so that he's pointing back towards his team to potentially set up a maul. And as we can see then, on the next picture, just as they come down to the ground, what you can see what's happened is James Ryan, by stepping across, he's actually put himself in front of Tadhg Byrne. So as he's brought Byrne down to the ground, he is kind of acting as a buffer.
Are you allowed to do
that? You're not. You know, Ireland got penalised for it by the referee.
Right.
So, like, it's something that teams have been doing since the dawn of lifting in the mid-90s. It's something teams have always been trying to do. Like, it's a case of, if you want to do it, you have to do it a little bit, you have to have a bit of subtlety to it. So it's more of a case that Ireland didn't quite have that subtlety and being able to kind of protect Tadhg Byrne without actually kind of going over the top with it. So James Ryan, obviously, like you can see it, he's kind of directly behind Byrne. So it's kind of just creating a blocker. It's literally like it's obstruction is the dictionary definition of it. So Ireland gave away a penalty there.
I was interested in this one because you can see Ringrose is actually at the front there. He's joining it. He was actually part of the line out.
Yeah, they're doing that a lot. Like most teams will do that a lot. They'll have potentially a scrum half, or, you know, any member of the team will kind of stand in at various points in a line out, sometimes at the front, so that they just kind of have a blocker. But what they might do then is they might have some more of their kind of like loose forwards out in the back line to work as runners. So that's kind of nothing revolutionary. You'd see a lot of teams doing that, but we just have another.
What's the point of it, though? What role is he going to? Are they trying to get the ball in his hands somewhere off the maul, off the back of the maul, so that you've got somebody with footwork, as opposed to just the? So traditionally, we would have seen the number 8 or the hooker be the person who gets the ball at the back of that, right? I'm wondering, is there any point where they're thinking, let's see what happens if we were to have Larmour or Ringrose, who has a bit of footwork off the back of as that maul collapses or as far as it goes. Is there any point in that, or is he just a body there to fill in numbers?
I think it's a wait and see case, so that they might just run that play 10 times in a row across the span of 3 or 4 different games by maybe setting up a maul or popping the ball out to, CJ Stander or a traditional kind of hard runner, and kind of build up a pattern of things so the teams are watching them do this. And then someday down the line, it could be half a season down the line, they always know that they have the option of bringing in, whether it's Gary Ringrose who is standing in it, or it might be James Lowe, or it might be Conor Murray or something like that. And it's kind of creating the diversion. So the teams are looking at him going, I wonder what he's doing here, just like you're doing right now. So they're looking at him thinking, surely he's here for a reason.
Yeah.
He might not necessarily actually be there for a reason, other than to just put that picture in people's heads. Yeah. Okay. But we're just going to look at another example of that lineout when Ireland got caught even later on in the game then as well. So this was twice during the game. Like, it's just poor setup. It's just not selling the picture right. So as we can see this time round, it's Andrew Porter lifting Ryan Baird. So this is our fourth picture. So this is just setting the scene again. It is Porter lifting Ryan Baird up into the air, and as you can see, Porter facing directly back towards the touchline as normal. But as you can see, then when he hits the ground, again, he's directly behind Ryan Baird, acting as that shield, acting as that buffer between the ball and the Italian maul. And then we actually have another picture here, which is just a closer up view, and you can see just how obvious it is and how easy it is to spot for the referee. And it is something that, as I said, it's been going on since the dawn of time in rugby, but it is something at the moment that they have been clamping down on that little bit harder. So, look, if Ireland are going to try do this at the weekend against Scotland, they are going to have to be a lot more subtle about it.
Yeah, or maybe don't do it. The whole point of the penalties is like to try and condition behaviour. It's like the offside in people in front of the kicker chasing the ball. It's like no one ever gets pinged for that, and then all of a sudden it's like a festival of penalties for it, and hopefully it stops.
Yeah, these come in waves. Like almost every offence in the game is going to be clamped down on at some point, and you go through. It might be a month, it might be 6 months where referees are going absolutely hard on it. And look, eventually, over time, it's going to trickle off. I would say in a year, you're going to see loads of this and it's going to be going unpunished. At the moment, it's something the referees are a bit hot on.
The 5 metre tap and go is making a comeback?
It is. And this is something I've enjoyed now over the course of this season so far. And it seems to be more and more every single weekend we're seeing it. And it's something we saw Leinster doing quite a bit on Saturday against Ulster. Just in general, I've never, as much as I love scrums, I've never really been a fan of the 5 metre scrum, unless you're completely on top at the set piece. I always just think there's too much that can go wrong in it. Just the slip of a leg, the slip of a few studs on the ground can cost you a penalty at the scrum. And when you're on the 5 metre line of the opposition, I just think there's too much to risk there unless you're completely on top. This is a much more controlled environment. And look, also as well, I think one thing that adds to it, it just speeds up the game in general for teams to be doing this. And it probably makes things a little bit more entertaining, because I know so many people turn off rugby because they just get caught in an endless set of resets and an endless set of, a penalty at a scrum leading to another scrum, which leads to another penalty. And you can lose 3 or 4 minutes at a time on it, particularly the closer you get to the try line. Move it back out towards the 22. I think teams are much more willing to have a go and have an attack, and they want to get the ball in and out. But when you're that close to a try line, it just always seems to be messy. So this is something that I think is just speeding up the game. It's nice to see it coming back in as well. And we're going to look at how Leinster have been using this over the last while, and how they did it against Ulster, which this actually led up to. This was the penalty in about 2 phases time. Michael Bent is going to go over for Leinster's first try. So as we can see here, you've got in the picture in front of us, James Treacy is bending down to tap the ball and go from 5 metres out. On his left, he is Rhys Ruddock, who's latching onto him, ready to go. And then to his right, he has Scott Fardy as well. So what they're going to be doing, the plan here is that James Treacy, Rhys Ruddock and Scott Fardy, essentially they are going to be hitting the Ulster tacklers at the same time. They're going to be going in a wave of 3. But crucially, what Ruddock and Fardy have to be wary of, and what they have to make sure they don't do, is get ahead of James Treacy and initiate the contact first, because at that point then the 2 of them are going to be offside. So if we move on to our second picture, you can see, I mean, just about, they actually have timed this really, really well. They are just about connecting just as James Treacy is being tackled. So they're not moving ahead of him, and they haven't gone offside, and they haven't, there's nothing illegal in it. They're actually doing this just right.
So just to clarify, from the laws of the game, are they allowed to touch him until he's touched, or do they have to wait until he's touched and then they can join?
No, they are actually allowed to. I think one of them at least is allowed to pre-bind onto James Treacy. That actually is allowed. I know it's something a lot of players have kind of complained about before. I did see Nigel Owens make a very good point about this, though, that when he was asked about it, that he kind of hadn't thought about this before, up until he said that if you think about it, so many tackles these days are actually two tacklers on one ball carrier. So at some point you actually kind of have to put a bit of balance back to it and allow a ball carrier to have that extra bit of support. But on our second picture here, we can actually just see the point of the impact. We can see the point of the impact that the three of them are having at the same time. And then we move on to our third picture. And this is what you see. This is why they're doing it. This is the protection you get. You can see that James Treacy's been tackled. Ruddock and Fardy have come in over and they've managed to clean out, and it gives you clean ball. So there's no chance for an Ulster player to get into a jackal position on top of that, because no sooner has James Treacy been tackled that he has two support players getting right in over him and sealing off that. So the caveats for all of this, as much as it gives you clean ball, you have to be wary about moving offside, moving ahead of that ball carrier and causing an obstruction. And also, there is so much momentum when you're kind of charging in behind that player and giving him support. You can very easily go off your feet. But this is a good example. Leinster did it right, they did it legally, and ultimately, 2 phases later, it led to a try.
Yeah, it does look like they're off their feet in that picture as well. That's the thing.
It's a screen. Yeah, but we all know that at some point players will kind of fall off their feet. Yeah. It's about whether you actually fly off your feet.
Yeah. As long as you're not a human torpedo, you generally get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. You will.
Okay. Right, England. Shades of Ireland in 2019. What's going on here?
Oh, big time. Look, we kind of spoke about their discipline last week. And
just want to say we're clearing the rest of the hour, and we're just going to go for 60 minutes on why English rugby is in the toilet that it is currently. Neil, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Well, obviously we spoke about their extraordinary penalty count last week, but it's funny just listening to the various rugby podcasts I kind of tune into. It is incredible. I just was thinking, God, I've heard all this before. All the things people were saying. It was just ringing in my head, going, God, this is a really familiar conversation and talking points that are coming up. But one aspect of it, look, the style of play, the ugly rugby and all the kicking is something that's been spoken of as well. But selection. If we think that we have conservative selection policies here in Irish rugby when it comes to trying players out, Eddie Jones is taking it to another level entirely. He seems completely oblivious to what's happening on a week-to-week basis in the Premiership. It's like he's a club manager who kind of has his squad and, he would literally have to sign a new player to bring him in. Like guys like Marcus Smith, Sam Simmons and Joe Simmons tearing it up every week in the Premiership, and they look further away from getting called into the squad than they ever have been. Now, this is based on Charlie Morgan in The Telegraph, who I know has been on OTBM many times. He did a fascinating breakdown last week of Jones' use of players since he took charge in 2016. So the one that jumped out, now I hope you haven't seen this because I want to put the question to you. Eddie Jones has been in charge of England for 62 test matches. How many out halves have started a test match for him?
2?
4.
3.
Wow.
So in 62 matches, only 3 out halves have actually started a test match. But the worst thing about that is, obviously it's George Ford and Owen Farrell. The third one, Danny Cipriani, he only started 1 game.
Wow. And
so
Cipriani the thing that maybe it was like, because I heard a clip of him during the week talking about how much advice he gets on picking the team, and he really loves that advice. You could hear it. It was brilliant, right? It was like brilliant sarcasm that everybody kind of couldn't put. Do you think because Cipriani was such a bust when he picked him that he just decided, well, these guys clearly know nothing? That was his little bone thrown to the UK, the English rugby hacks, and that was it. It's like, no, I gave you Cipriani. What more do you want?
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that was this. Like, the breakdown is staggering. Like, 61 of his 62 test matches, he has either started with George Ford or Owen Farrell at number 10. If you look at Ireland in that period, we talk about Ireland and the lack of a succession plan we obviously have at out half. We've started 6 out halves over the course of that time.
Jack Carty, Sexton, Burns, Ross Byrne, Ian Madigan?
No, Paddy Jackson and Carberry.
Oh, Carberry.
But the counterpoint, obviously, Neil, is that Owen Farrell is 29 and there isn't the same sense of urgency at all.
100% that is there as well. But look, if one of those players gets a bad injury, all of a sudden you're in serious trouble. And
they play Italy and Georgia, you know. At some point, you got to try somebody new just to make sure.
Exactly, and they've had summer tours in. They had a summer tour in Argentina in 2017 when the Lions were away as well. George Ford started each of those tests over in Argentina.
Wow.
That's the point of that. You know so much about him already. But another part of it as well, this also went into the debuts. So Eddie Jones has given out 47 debuts in that time across his 62 caps. Ireland have given out 54 debuts in that time, so Ireland have given out 7 more as well. But crucially, the impact that those debutants are having on the team. 8 of the 47 debuts that Eddie Jones has given out since he took charge, only 8 of those players have amassed 20 or more caps. So the vast, vast majority are really getting in. They're not making an impact, and they're being cast aside again because he's happy with what he has. If you look at Ireland, of the 54 players that they've tried out since the 2015 Rugby World Cup, by Sunday, I'm assuming Byrne is going to play this Sunday, so that will make it 13 of the 54 players will have hit the 20 cap mark. So it's clearly obvious that Ireland are have tried out more players than England over the last few years, and more of those players have actually made a bit of an impact.
And we are definitely conservative when it comes to this stuff as well. So
and I'm not saying all this to try and make Ireland look like these gunslingers that'll try out anything. Like, we are the conservative mark by any metric, most people would say, and England are far below it.
Very quickly, Champions Cup and Challenge Cup draws today. 2 home games for Leinster and Munster in the round of last 16. So what level of opposition should we expect for them?
Tricky opposition, because the way they've split it up, that teams cannot draw another side from their own domestic competition. So Munster and Leinster, they are either going to be playing French or English opposition. Now, granted, they are going to have home advantage for it, but the teams they are likely to face any one of La Rochelle, Toulon, Sale Sharks, Lyon, Toulouse, Clermont-Auvergne, Bristol, Exeter, or Gloucester. There aren't too many gimmies in that pile. Like, you look at Gloucester, maybe are struggling in the Premiership at the moment. The rest of them, it's a pretty tough set of fixtures. Racing 92, Wasps, and Bordeaux are the only French or English clubs that they can't draw, because those 3 sides are also guaranteed home advantage, because they won their 2 games on the pitch. But you Scarlets and Edinburgh are the other 2 teams that make up the draw. Unfortunately, Munster and Leinster, they'd probably prefer to be playing one of them that they're more familiar with and have beaten many times down the years, but they won't be able to face them. Interesting. I am interested to see the Challenge Cup as well, because it's probably something we don't cover too much, but there are quite a few decent teams in it with the way the competition had to be broken down. And obviously we have 2 sides in it at the moment in Connacht and Ulster. So
and both playing really well as well. Like, I thought Connacht were brilliant against Munster in parts. Very quickly, we're completely out of time. The Lions Watch, we didn't get to do this last week. What are your current thoughts about the makeup and how it's going to go?
I think this weekend it's all about looking out at Welsh players, taking on Italy, a chance for them after a few tough games to really, really flex the muscles and show off a little bit to Warren Gatland, who obviously knows them well enough anyway as it is. But like Callum Sheedy coming off the bench against England last time around, he was absolutely brilliant. Louis Rees-Zammit was someone we'd wanted to talk about last week but didn't get around to. He is electric, and I think at this stage, barring a disaster, he's probably on the plane as well. With England, it's probably more players who aren't in the English squad that are probably making an impact for Lions at the moment, like Sam Simmons and Marcus Smith. And I think then as well, Byrne is a player a lot of people are going to be talking about over the next while. He's the informed player in Irish rugby, I think it's fair to say. And his versatility gives him, I think, every chance of being on the lines this summer.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll
And saving the union as well.
Oh yeah, well,
Paul
it's
Byrne
very,
to save
very
the
important that we saved that union. I mean, maybe if the Lions were to be beaten and it was to result of who knows? I mean, we've already think that Meghan Markle's bringing down the monarchy. So big week for the monarchists and the unionists. 10 minutes past 9 this morning, Neil. Good stuff. Thank you for joining.